Today I'll read Shokushu number 7, Living Calmness. In a natural state, the weight of objects is always underside. The experience of calmness in our body occurs when every part of our body is naturally underside. Calmness is a state of mind that reflects all things clearly, like the still surface of water. If there is a moon appears. If there is a flying bird appears. Calmness is our original and natural state. If we can understand this, we can experience true living calmness. Well, it's so nice to see everyone. I hope you're all doing very well. I'm recording a session. I talked to Curtis Sensei this past week, and he suggested that I do that. And he might look into posting things onto YouTube as he had been doing before. So when I'm teaching the class, I'm often teaching what I'm working on. In other words, it's like maybe some of you have heard this expression, the edge of your training. What is the edge of your training? So what is it that you're working on specifically? And so, of course, it can be many different things. So especially in this class, that's what I tend to focus on. The last few classes we did a review, and yet it's always kind of right for me pushing at that edge, exploring. So, and I'm offering it so that we can explore together. So one of the things that we talk a lot about in this practice, you hear about expressions like Shinken Shobu, life and death training. Our life depends on it. That was something Nalawai Sensei used to say. And yet, I think it's also very important to acknowledge the humor in this practice. And so today I'd like to speak a little bit about humor in our training. And so when I say humor, I'm not talking about like telling jokes and laughing a lot. That's not exactly what I mean. It's more like taking things lightly, being light in our approach, in a humor-filled way, rather than in a heavy-handed way. And I think this can be very useful for us as we advance in our practice. So yeah, we talk a lot about discipline, and so it can, and like otomo practice and being around the sensei, and all of this can lead to a seriousness in the training. But we have to be careful not to make that into something, as I said, heavy-handed. So this a British philosopher, Alan Watts, used to say that life is a game, or life is like a show. We're putting on a show, or life is putting on a show. And in our own dojo, Clayton Nalawai Sensei, he used to say stuff like, he was fond of saying this particular thing. You know what enlightenment is, right? You'd all be sitting there waiting very patiently. Enlightenment means lighten up. This is what he would tell us. And so, yeah, it's just approaching our practice with this sort of view that even our resistance can be something that we can smile at, you see. And this can be difficult depending on what we're going through in our lives. I don't mean that this can be, that everybody should just be able to do this without any problem. It takes some practice, right? It takes some adjustments on our part. And that's where it starts. It starts with our resistances, especially the smaller ones, the things that maybe are a bit insignificant. So to be able to smile at them, laugh a little bit to ourselves about our habitual patterns and resistances is very useful. And that can lead to this bigger view of things, bigger, kind of viewing things in a light-hearted, humor, filled with humor way. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about today. There's a lot to say about it, but I think it can come out when we have our comments at the end. I don't need to say too much right now. But for instance, when we're sitting, right? So we say sit up straight. Focus or clear your mind, these kind of things. And then when that doesn't happen, when your body begins to slump, or your mind begins to drift, we can smile. And that smile can automatically bring us back, even if it's just for a moment, to this present moment. And we don't want to be, so we say sit up straight, here's a kind of an analogy, but we don't want to be rigid about it, right? That's heavy-handed when we become rigid in our way. So let's focus today on the lighter approach to everything. And, we can talk about it a bit more after we do some sitting. Today we'll return to our normal pattern. We'll do, about 20 minutes of key breathing, then we'll do some key meditation, and then we'll do mind-body meditation. All right? We'll start with some key breathing.
Okay, stretch. All right, we'll continue with key meditation, Shutru Ho, Kakudai Ho. Shutru Ho. Kakudai Ho. Shutru Ho. Kakudai ho. Shuchu ho. Kakudai ho. Stretch. We'll continue with mind-body meditation.
hope that was great for everyone. So, one of, it was, I guess, one of the trips to Europe in the last 5 years that I made with Curtis Sensei. Wasn't very long ago. We were in the Netherlands, in Helmond, having lunch. And I know there are people here that were present when this took place, what I'm going to talk about. But, you know, Curtis Sensei likes to have coffee. And so they bring these carafes of coffee around to the tables when we're having lunch at this little local restaurant, which is a lovely place. And they have this mechanism, this little button or something that you push on the top to open the spout, and then you pour. So I was sitting next to Curtis Sensei, and I looked and I saw that he needed a refill of his coffee, and someone had just brought from the kitchen a fresh carafe. We had already had a cup or two. And so I went to pour, and it wouldn't pour. It was like just stuck somehow. So, you know, I made some adjustment, and I'm just right next to Sensei, and I'm pouring, and I open this, I push the button after making this adjustment, after trying to pour, nothing, making an adjustment, then push the button. The coffee, because of the pressure, it was so full, there was this pressure from the steam, just sprayed coffee all over Curtis Sensei. Yeah, it didn't hit anybody else but him. Yeah, my teacher. And, you know, what can you do? Sorry, Sensei. I mean, there's just, it's done, right? So all I could do was help clean up, of course, and smile about it. There's just nothing that you can do to, you know, make the shirt suddenly dry. And his face not be covered in steaming coffee. Unfortunately, he wasn't injured, but you know, and of course you learn, maybe, okay, next time I point it away from Sensei when I pour. But yeah, so this is a bit what I'm talking about. It's a very mild example. But there's being apologetic, of course, sorry, Sensei, but overly apologetic is not going to improve the situation. It's not going to change anything. So you just keep one point and smile. And so, again, this is not always easy, depending on the situation and our own way of being in these kind of situations. But I thought I'd throw that out there as a sort of example of what we're talking about here today. And then to open to your comments, questions if you have any. I can't see everybody because I'm recording this, so please go ahead and just speak up if you'd like to say something.
Good morning, Sensei.
Morning. Listener Sensei. Hello.
I have so many examples, but I have one in particular that I'll share. I was with another person who studies Aikido, and I don't know the situation we were exactly in, but we were arguing. We were getting rather upset with one another, and we were driving, and I remember we were just talking, and it just wasn't good. There was no real good connection going on. And finally, I looked over and said, you know, someday we're going to laugh about this. It's just not funny right now, but we're going to laugh about it someday. And that person looked at me and goes, "No, we're never going to laugh about this. Ever." And then later on, we both burst into laughter because we knew how ridiculous we were being. It was just hilarious. So I have to say, you can never lose your sense of humor. You gotta, whatever you can lose everything else, but don't lose your sense of humor because I'm telling you, you will laugh about it someday. That's all I got to say. Thank you for the class. I really
Yes.
enjoyed it.
Wonderful story and a great example, right? And again, we can think, oh well, this other person has to lighten up. If this other person just lightened up, everything would be better. But all you can do is do what you did, right? You can't control whether he lightens up or laughs. But you lightened up, right? In that moment, you found a way. You saw the humor through the heaviness, and yeah. So this is a great example, right? To be able to do this, and again, it's there are some situations where it doesn't require laughing or being silly. In fact, that's not really it at all, being silly, right? It's just being able to be in the moment and see kind of the bigger picture, right? And so, yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. That's a wonderful example. I have examples like that with Celine. At dinner when the conversation got heavy or something, and then one of us just said, something. I remember one time it was just like, "Is it time for ice cream?" And then everything kind of melted. Haha. Okay, anybody else?
Good morning, Sensei. Good evening, and hello to everyone.
Hi,
This is
Phoenix.
Phoenix. I think for me, just from when you started talking, what came up is just how, actually, this goes back also to Nalawai Sensei. So he always had great images to help us understand what's happening sort of in our heads or whatever. And one of them was the idea that it was like a fireman in your head. And some distress would come up, whether it was an argument with someone else or wanting something that wasn't happening at the moment. And so this fireman is in like a blank room pulling the bell, like there's a fire, you got to do something right now. And it was just so helpful to me because it is exactly what happens, right? It's not like I can actually say, oh, this is, there's not a discrete problem that can be fixed by ringing the bell or by doing anything else. It's just part of how we are. And so that sense of being able to watch irritation come up in me, or have a family, have something come up where there's just that distress, and just say, this is normal. This is just what happens. It's a very light, there's just some time that there's this light touch that you can just let it slide away, rather than the case building and all the other kinds of things that and I'm sure others are good at. It's just, I think one of these things that's coming more and more to me is just Aikido, and this practice just offers this kind of ease. It's like, oh, well, keep moving. And so anyway, thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this is what you're talking about. And of course, I recall that image that he used to say about the alarm sounding and the little fireman running and going and doing something, and causing the tension, right, to build. It's kind of seemingly automatically. But what you're talking about, I think, is it's of course really important in our training and really important in our life. The key saying that I read today was living calmness. And so living calmness talks about weight underside. Right? And so what does weight underside feel like? Right? What does living calmness feel like? It feels like nothing. Right? It certainly doesn't feel heavy. You see? Yesterday we had a training in the park. And, we did a lot of repetitive bokken cutting and these the different suburi. And my knee swelled a little bit after. So my knee felt heavy. That's what heavy feels like. Or when we get a stomach ache, we've eaten too much or we've eaten something that doesn't agree with us. We get a stomach ache. That's what heavy feels like, or a headache. Right? Otherwise, we just feel the way we feel. It's like nothing. Right? And so, yeah, the key saying is telling us that the natural state of things is weight underside, is this kind of light feeling. And yet we seem so inclined to want to make things heavy. Right? Now, I'm not saying when you have someone in your family that passes away that you shouldn't grieve. No, this is all part of what we need to go through. But the heaviness part of it doesn't have to be there, right? And that you can do that without getting heavy and morose or feeling like you're ill. You see, I mean, when we experience heavy emotion, we can feel that way. But we're talking about finding also a different way when we experience heavy emotions, right? So yeah, this is really important in our lives, just in moving ahead in life. Thank you. Anyone else have any final comment? See, we've reached the end of our class here. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending and supporting. And just take this, what you've experienced and learned here, please take it with you throughout the day, throughout the week, as a reminder, to just, when you feel that things are getting a bit heavy, to just lighten up a bit and see how that works for you. Domo arigatou gozaimashita. Have a great week. Aloha.